One thing I find fascinating about the current state of the housing market is the fact that we have been told that so many people have the golden handcuffs with their mortgages, that they're not going to sell because they have just these low rates, and there's no way that somebody with a 3% rate is going to trade that in for a 6.5% or 7% rate that you would get today. But what we're actually seeing is, in fact, that is not the case, because more and more people are continuing to list their homes for sale according to Redfin. Because one thing that was completely underestimated is the fact that people do not stay put. You know, right? People buy houses and they move, they sell, guys. And one way that they know this is a couple of things. Number one is that the share of homeowners that have an interest rate below 6% has now fallen from its record high, and that's due to more and more people selling and trading in their old 3% rate for today's current rates. In the middle of 2022, 92.8% of people had a mortgage rate that was below 6%. Well, now the number has fallen to 88.5%. So just a year and a half later, it's fallen by 4 percentage points. And Redfin expects this trend to continue into 2024 as more and more people decide to sell their home for one reason or another. The most common reasons that people are selling right now are because of major life events like a divorce, which gives them no other choice, or they just want to move. They want to move to a different house or a different city. It appears that the housing experts have underestimated the fact that people will need to move no matter what, okay? There are deaths, there are divorce, there are births, there are job changes, and besides those necessary reasons that people have to move, you also have just the fact that people want to move. You know, if you don't really like the house you're in, you know, we know that so many people have buyer's remorse who bought homes over the past couple of years, and you're not happy with your decision. Having a low interest rate is probably not going to be enough to keep somebody like that in their house for a very long time. And this is what we're starting to see. We're starting to see the market open up. We have the amount of new listings coming online that is up year over year. And what this data is also showing is that more and more people are willing to jump into the housing market at these current rates. People are realizing, I've been wanting to sell this house, but I have a 4% rate and I just can't wait anymore. You know, I really want to move. I really want to get to that city. I really want to buy that other house. And some people are able to do this because they've been able to build enough equity and had the house long enough to take advantage of the run-up in the market and either move to a cheaper location or to downsize the house, and that extra equity helps fill in the gap when it comes to putting down a higher down payment, having people able to balance out their new mortgage payment even with a higher interest rate. They talked to another real estate agent in Seattle, and they pretty much backed up whatever we just said. And they said that they're working with a lot of homeowners who are selling because of divorces, new jobs, or deaths in the family. And another real estate agent says that they're also working with homeowners who are basically bursting at the seams and selling because they've outgrown their current home. That's the other problem. That's part of people's buyer's remorse. They buy a house that's too small. You realize you made a mistake, and the low rate's not going to be enough to keep you in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house when you have 4 kids. And what this confirms is it confirms that all along that people are going to move regardless of what happens in the market. We had like this kind of temporary freeze when rates were continuing to go up, up, and up. And now that they've kind of come down a little bit from their peak, people are starting to realize that this is probably going to be the new normal, and it's time to just get on with it. This is why I think 2024 is set up to be such an interesting year for real estate. We're already seeing inventory rise at levels that are unusual for the winter months, and I just keep wondering, where are these numbers going to go when springtime hits? Are we going to see a massive surge in inventory? Because pretty much every year we do, without fail. And I just wonder if that surge in inventory that we're going to get in the spring is going to bring us back to pre-pandemic inventory levels across the country. I have a feeling that it's very possible that could happen. Now, this is one of these houses that I have seen perpetually for sale every single time I've walked through this neighborhood. The current price is $10.7 million. They rented it back in 2021 for $28,000, and then they had it listed anywhere between 18.5 million to everywhere in between the 10.7 million that it's listed for now. And the current rental price is now $25,000 a month, but they were asking up to $55,000 per month at one point for this house for rent, and settled on $25,000, guys. Like, that is absolutely crazy how much these people overshoot the listing price for sale, for rent, for everything. Is absolutely nuts. And if you think that's crazy, property tax bill here is $95,000 per year to top it all off. Because the other thing that's definitely going to start driving inventory numbers in the future as well is distress, okay? Because we're starting to see the amount of foreclosure activity tick up as well. And don't get me wrong, guys, this is not anywhere near the level that we saw during the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis. It's not anywhere near that. But the fact that foreclosures are starting to ramp up is a sign that more and more people can't afford their houses anymore. According to ATTOM data, foreclosure filings, including default notices, scheduled auctions, and bank repossessions, were reported on about 357,000 households across the country, which is up 10% from 2022. So in 1 year, from 2022 to 2023, we saw a 10% increase in foreclosure activity. But the interesting thing is that even with that uptick, that the foreclosure filings are still lower than they were pre-pandemic. What that tells me is that things are starting to normalize throughout the economy, and especially the housing market right now. And most likely what's going to happen is we're going to see the amount of foreclosures continue to tick up because the moratoriums are over and because it's returning to normal, right? And when you return to normal, we're going to see more foreclosure activity. That's what history tells us. Because as of 2023, the foreclosure filings are still down 28% from 2019's pre-pandemic numbers. So what this data suggests is that we could essentially see another additional 30% uptick in foreclosure filings, and that would still be considered normal compared to where we were at pre-pandemic, guys. And the reason I'm talking about this is because inventory has been the biggest problem, right? Well, you're starting to see the housing market unfreeze. You're starting to see people with low interest rates sell anyways for whatever their reason is. You're starting to see more foreclosures come online, and you're going to see the normal spring selling season. And just with those things combined, I think that could get us very close to, if not at, pre-pandemic inventory levels this spring and summer, guys. We'll see. But it's definitely shaping up to become that. And to just give you a scale of how many foreclosures we had back during the GFC compared to now, back then in the peak of 2010, when we had the most foreclosure filings, there was 2.9 million in 2010. Well, 2023, there was 357,000, guys. So nowhere near that number, basically 10% of that number. The CEO of ATTOM, he says the same thing. This is going to be returned to the normal. You know, having more foreclosures is normal. And places that can look forward to seeing these foreclosure listings the most are places like California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Illinois. Those 5 states are seeing the biggest numbers in foreclosure filings. So if you live in one of these places, keep an eye out for the foreclosures. Here we have a house for sale for $7.25 million, and it's not quite a flip, but it kind of is, because if you go back in their history, they tried selling it back in 2019, and they took it off the market in 2020, and it looks like they made an underhanded deal with somebody under the table, not on the MLS or anything like that, and ended up selling it in 2020 for $1,725,000. And look what happens when you take the property off the homestead exemption. It went from $18,000 to $25,000 to now $40,000 per year in property taxes. People go into foreclosure, it's bad news for them. But overall, this is all good news for the housing market, guys, because our problem has been high interest rates, low inventory, which has made prices shoot up way too high to the point where people can't afford it. And so now that we're starting to see inventory unlock and rates down a little bit, this is good news for people who have been waiting. And that's one thing I stressed on my channel throughout 2023, like, just hold your horses, guys. Have some patience. It's not going to kill you to wait another year. In fact, affordability is very likely to improve, and that's exactly what's happening. And some people are already out there taking advantage of this because mortgage applications this week jumped 10% from the week earlier. So it's funny when they come out with these mortgage applications numbers, like, you know, 1 week it went up, 1 week it went down. Like, it almost doesn't really matter because of, you know, how volatile that is. It swings a lot from week to week. But of course, all the news agencies like to come out and report that because it makes the housing market look good. It makes it look robust. It makes it look like we're having this strong recovery that the news is always trying to make it look like is happening. But when you zoom out and take a closer look at these numbers, you see the real picture, just like the foreclosures. Because even though it's up 10% from the week before, it's down 20% from that same week a year ago, guys. So the reality is the amount of people out there buying is still down significantly, down by 20%. And this is where I think we're going to see this big rebalancing with the housing market, because you're starting to see more and more inventory come to market at a very unusual time of year. Simultaneously, we still have mortgage applications far lower than they were just 1 year ago. And that is a good combination to have if you're a buyer right now. So the more time that this scenario plays out where new listings keep trickling onto the housing market, but there's fewer and fewer buyers out there to absorb those listings, it's going to rebalance the market, guys. It's going to bring us back to a healthy level of inventory, which is what everybody needs in order to see prices come back down to a reasonable amount. You guys hear that? You hear that little ting, 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 ting? There's like weird stuff out here in these lawns sometimes that make these weird noises. It's like a high frequency thing. Very strange. But the other thing that keeps reappearing in these mortgage applications data is the amount of refinances, guys. This is something that continues to go up because the refinances, on the other hand, went up 11% in 1 week, and they're 10% higher now from the same week that they were a year ago. And what this tells me is a lot of people are in trouble. You know, we've talked about this before on the channel, but when you're seeing people trade in their 3 or 4% mortgage rates for a 6.5% or 7%, that's not a good sign for them. The only reason that somebody would do that is because they need to cash out. They need to pull money out of the property. And so that's the interesting thing that's happening with our economy in general, I believe. You see a lot of these headline data points that on the surface look good, right? Like, for example, this with mortgage applications up 10%. But when you really dig deeper into what's happening and see that, well, it's actually still down 20% from a year ago, and the refinance activity's up 10% from a year ago, well, that changes the perspective on things. That changes the outlook of what's actually going on. And that's why it's important to read past the headlines. And I think that's why a lot of people watch my channel, because that's one thing I do here is I read past the headline. I look into this a couple levels deeper and see, is this actually what's really happening? Or are they just trying to make things look better than they are right now? Just like this whole thing with the commercial office space, guys, this is an absolute disaster that's being downplayed right now and is not being given the weight that it probably should be by the media. Because right now, US office vacancy rates have now hit a brand new all-time high. In the fourth quarter of 2023, 19.6% of office space in major US cities went unleased. And a year prior, it was 18.8%. So it went up almost a full percentage point in just 1 year. The last time it was this high was back in 1986. There was a high of 19.3% of vacant office space. So now we are surpassing that. And I am not surprised given all of the work from home opportunities that are available to people out there. And this is a huge deal because it means we have more vacancies than we've had in 40 years, essentially. And you might say, well, you know, how does this affect me, Michael? Just the average Joe that works a regular job and I just want to buy a regular house. Why do I care, you know, what the office vacancy rates are? Well, the reason that you should care is because this is not going to be good for the economy, because what this is going to do is it's going to destroy small banks, because we already had a banking crisis almost a year ago now, and the Fed swooped in to save it before, you know, we had some kind of major issue. But as more and more of the owners of these office buildings start to default on their loans and basically give the keys back to the bank, because there's no penalty for doing that, by the way, which is why so many of them do it, it leaves the bank stuck. You know, they're stuck holding this asset that's now worth 50% less than it was 10 years ago. And sure, they can offload it, they can recover some of that loss. But how many small banks can take 50% losses on, you know, office buildings like that? How many of them can do that without completely going out of business, without having another banking crisis, and especially without pulling back significantly on lending? Because these banks rely on those mortgage payments to be able to fund their bank, right? To be able to make new loans in order to keep the business running, guys. And if the bank can no longer make new loans, they can no longer make money, because that's how banks make money, and exactly how they lose money as well, which is why we're starting to see problems with this. So basically what I want people to know is that just because you're not looking to lease office space, or you don't work in an office or anything like that, that this is not going to have an effect on you, because it will at some point down the road when these things start to ripple throughout the economy. Because if more banks start to close and more banks have problems with lending and have to tighten up even further, that means less and less businesses and customers have access to loans, which makes the economy contract and ultimately is going to end up putting us in this recession, guys. Like, there's so, just like I said the other day, there's so many paths forward to get us into this recession, and like zero to few ways to get us out. There's really no way to get out of this without experiencing this at some point. But I think the problem is too many people get hung up on when is it going to happen. I need to know exactly when. I need to know down to the month and the date of when exactly we're going to hit a recession, so they can feel comfortable about what they're doing. Like, you don't need to feel like that, guys. In order to be prepared for this, all you need to do is make sure you don't have debt. Make sure that all of your bills are paid. Make sure you have solid income. Make sure that you can survive without income for 6 months. You know, if you can do those things, then you'll probably be able to weather a recession much better than 90% of people out there. And those are not very extreme goals to have. I think that's the best thing to do for most people. I think it's better to just be prepared for the worst and hope for the best. And then if this magical soft landing scenario actually comes to fruition, which I think the likelihood of that happening is almost zero, but if it does, then all you are doing is you just bettered yourself financially, and you're in a much stronger position than you were before, just because you were ready for things to go down. Basically, there's no downside to being prepared for the worst, but there's a lot of downside to doing nothing and keep on believing these headlines that continually try to paint a picture that we're in a better position that we're actually in this economy. That's why I'm not personally worried, guys. Like, some people say, oh, you need to just relax, Michael. Things aren't as bad as you say it is, and you just need to chill out. Like, I am chilled out. I'm fine, guys. Like, whatever happens, I'm ready for it, okay? I have money saved, I have all my bills paid, I have my emergency fund. I'm not worried, okay? I'm worried for the people that are being led to believe that everything is fine, and that because of that, they don't have to do anything to make sure that they can continue with their life. I think the few people that end up listening are really going to be helped by this in the end, and are going to be happy that they prepared for an upcoming recession. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.